You're watching our special coverage of US President Barack Obama's India visit. Joining me now, Seema Sirohi, analyst at Gateway House. With me still, Shaurya Doval of India Foundation, Kaushik Chatterjee of Tata Steel, Ganesh Natarajan of Zensar, Bahroz Kamdin of Deloitte. Thank you very much for coming in, Seema. We've been discussing business, and the business bit is really underway. If yesterday was politics, strategic affairs, nuclear cooperation, today it's been business, apart from the Republic Day, where of course the big business that rolled down Rajpath right in front of President Obama's eyes would have sort of set him thinking about the huge market potential that Indian defense provides, the Make in India initiative, the easing up of defense rules. So before I go across to Shaurya, also on the same bit, what do you think was going on in President Obama's mind when he saw all that Soviet-era equipment roll down, and then there was just one American big fat plane in the skies?
Well, obviously, one word is opportunity for the Americans, and India is the largest buyer these days of weapons. So there's a huge potential for them to market their wares here. And with this whole new initiative under the Defense, Trade and Technology Initiative, they've identified 4 projects. So things are moving in that direction. I would say that India is kind of slowly moving to the American side of the playing field. Okay,
but American side of the playing field. I spent a month before and after Prime Minister Modi's maiden visit as Prime Minister to the United States, and I had opportunity to sort of get to understand the defense bit. Would it be a fair question, therefore, that it's the Americans who are slow, so to say, to wake up to the Indian opportunity, that all their fears about proliferation, for instance, or leakage of technology, copying of industrial secrets are basically misdirected fears? India does not have a record of leaking nuclear technology. That's something that a neighboring country has done. India does not have a history of copying wholesale industrial designs. That's another neighboring country. Yet you see this American reluctance to share technology with us. That is what a lot of Indian policy makers will tell you, that the Americans come and talk and they always want business, but when it comes to looking at the long-term relationship, they're the worst people to deal with. Is that a fair assessment, Seema?
To some extent, but things are changing. You know, we have a long history of not working together. So in order to change the...
Because of the obstinacy of the American side?
No, because of the Cold War, because of their perception that we were too close to the Soviets, etc., etc. There's like hundreds of reasons.
Well, they helped us, and Robin Raphael didn't. She was tilted towards Pakistan, as history is just now telling us.
Yes, but you know, we are not the easiest people to deal with either.
I completely agree.
Right? So our bureaucracy and our fears and our suspicions about Americans just about match their suspicions about us. You know, the Americans have been offering us, under the BTVI initiative, several projects. But for years, we haven't moved. We haven't bothered to take a serious look. So finally, they have narrowed it down. Under Modi, there's been a lot of energy and there's been a re-engagement with the United States. And yes, the United States has a bureaucracy and too many rules, and they want to do things their way. You know, something they call in
it's their way or the highway, really, for India. Seema, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, because I want to get a word in from Shaurya Doval, if he's willing to comment on this. Shaurya, really this issue, if you look at it broadly, one of the experts pointing out earlier in the show today that the Russians and the French have already worked with us as far as the nuclear cooperation is concerned. The Americans like to read a lot of legal fine print. There was a lawyer on the show who said that he wasn't sure whether these changes would need to go to Parliament. That's a question up in the air. At some point, the government will have to clarify that. But on this sentiment issue that I raised, that the Americans are extremely hard to deal with, and their record as far as India is concerned, their fears as far as proliferation is concerned, leakage of technology is concerned, are misdirected. We are a more dependable partner than what many Americans see us as. Is that an assessment that you would want to comment on?
Yes, Siddharth, I would totally agree with you that I think that, that we are indeed, as I said earlier, we are indeed are a natural ally, and that there should be less apprehension in the US minds about India. But as one of your speakers was earlier pointing out, I mean, it is very important to understand that we are a sovereign and that we are well within our legitimate rights to find for us partners at different points in time at our terms that are most beneficial to our national interests. So we should be doing business with the Russians and with the Americans. And at the same time, we understand the American point of view that they would like to try and maximize their interests or their issues to the extent possible. So I don't see a conflict in that. As a matter of fact, I think this is what the Prime Minister has been saying, that when the communication at the highest level engages, it provides a facilitative environment for some of these day-to-day or the tactical issues to sort themselves out. But that's the environment that we are in. India is indeed a large defense market for the US companies. India is a large potential market, and I think that is what the president would be looking at when he looks at India. India is to get technologies and hardware as well as software for its defense at the most competitive price from wherever in the world it gets. The Americans will have to compete for that market. But within that large framework, as I said, once we have the chemistry going, we are able to understand and explain to the Americans that, why we are such a dependable regime. I mean, you mentioned the fact is that, as most regimes, and this is some of the problems sometimes that foreign regimes have, that this is the institutional strength of what India is. That, we have a parliament, we have a constitution, we have elected representatives, and whichever government of the day is, it has to take the entire country on board and address all the issues of the country as it negotiates these international treaties and opportunities. So this is indeed an indication for the Americans to feel that we are a dependable, independent republic, which is again a shared value as far as I see between the Indians and the Americans.
Good point, Shaurya, and in fact, what is playing out on our screens right now is our live visuals, pictures and shots of the India-US CEO forum. And it just so happened that I spotted a leading light from the Indian taxation side, Nishit Desai, who's consistently been one of the voices against that retrospective amendment. I remember him being amongst the first to call it tax terrorism as and when it happened. He's right there in the audience. You can see a whole lot of other people. And incidentally, for some reason, there are a lot of tax people in the frame. I can see people from Price Waterhouse also there in the frame, standing up and talking. So we don't know when exactly these visuals came in because there's clearly a delay, but it's a full house at the India-US CEO forum. Bahroz, on that point, if I can come to you very quickly and sort of pose this as a question. All the time, whenever Indians travel across the globe, and even people and experts like you, when they are asked questions, we are always put on the back foot, really. Your tax architecture isn't good, you do retrospective amendments, you do a whole lot of stuff. But I never, or maybe I didn't pay enough attention, but I didn't see too much commentary, breast beating or banner headlines when it comes to one particular telecom company and what happened to it in its home domain in a large country which abuts Europe. They go after their tax dollars. If Indian taxmen were to try and maximize revenue because that is their job, why does it seem to become a national crisis?
Basically, I think what industry looks at is certainty. So if supposing there has been certainty for several years on a particular issue, and then something is changed, or there's a retrospective amendment, or there's a case law which does not support what has been happening in the industry for years together, that's where I think the issue is. So it's not purely on retrospective that people are angry with or challenging it, but it's basically something which has been accepted in India for years together. and then you make a change and you do it retrospectively. So then there's no certainty which is there, and that creates a lot of issues. So we have litigations which are on from 2002 onwards on this section 10A and all of that, where intent was very clear that they want to give the benefit by the government, but then the tax authorities come up with some issues, and then it keeps going into litigation year on year. So that, I think, is the issue which is most prominent for India.
Okay, you are absolutely right, and in fact, the only comment that one can perhaps offer on this entire matter is that our taxation architecture is also evolving, but I wonder if American companies are tracking what is happening to the direct taxes code. The fact that that doesn't seem to be any longer a priority as far as the Modi administration is concerned, because the previous administration cherry-picked from that entire code, took out whatever it wanted to incorporate, and now that code is just legalese, and maybe this government might just decide that it isn't worth the time to push through something in parliament of that, because there are far more important things, including the GST that is important. Let me also tell our viewers that some of the visuals that were playing out, we now have clarity. President Obama and Prime Minister Modi have already addressed the US-India CEO forum. That has happened completely as per the timeline that was expected, around 5:38. And from the breakdown of the sequence of events there that I recall, both addresses were supposed to be for 5 minutes each. Those are still pictures that have been put out by the Ministry of External Affairs that shows Prime Minister Modi and President Obama sitting there with what I thought was Mr. Cyrus Mistry, the India chair of the forum, and therefore, and after that, what you see is a large picture of presumably both the delegations, the Indian delegation, a big heavyweight one, Cyrus Mistry, Mukesh Ambani, Anil Ambani, Gautam Adani, Shashi Ruia, Anand Mahindra, and several other names, including two from public sector undertakings. We are also joined by a new guest on our discussion here, Mr. Percy Bilimoria, partner at AZB. Thank you very much, Mr. Bilimoria, for joining us. I will just come back to you in a minute, but a quick comment back here from Seema Sirohi, who is here with me, analyst at Gateway House. Seema, let's try and focus on the business bit. Earlier during the day today, I had occasion to ask Lalit Mansingh that wouldn't business have happened irrespective of the bonhomie that we are seeing at a government-to-government level, at a leader-to-leader level. He seemed to suggest that no, a lot of the personal chemistry would help in engaging business further. In the space that you cover and analyze, is this also a factor? You know, the bureaucratic hurdles that the defense sides of both countries put up, space cooperation, homeland security, there are vast bureaucracies on both sides who keep sort of crossing the T's, dotting the I's. Is that going to be blown away a bit?
I think personal chemistry does help. Especially with American leaders. You know, they always say in Washington that they should be able to pick up the telephone and call a particular person and, you know, particular leader in a country. And if you establish that, if there is a hurdle, you can talk and discuss it. And sometimes, as happened with the nuclear deal just now, the breakthrough in understanding, as President Obama said, that I think came after the principals engaged with each other.
And the Americans are very comfortable dealing with one guy.
Yes, they like a one-window situation.
Yeah, I think the one-window clearance probably emanated from there, because clearly that was not something that is from the Indian context. Allow me to go to Percy Bilimoria, and on our screens are visuals from the dinner that the Rashtrapati served President Obama and the First Lady. Percy Bilimoria, thank you very much for joining us. We've been discussing a host of issues, and clearly many of these concern you. I have before me a long list which constitutes the agenda items for the India-US business delegation discussions. One of them, item number 7, says issues on intellectual property laws and local content, especially with regard to pharma sector. There are other legal issues. Let me ask you to draw up for our viewers what you think are the big ticket items as far as that bit goes between India and US that need resolution and that would improve both our regulatory coordination and business and the development of a further business architecture.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is certainly a red letter day for the USIBC. On patents, especially pharma patents, it's a matter of huge concern. There are some legitimate concerns on both sides, and I think that is going to be one of the more difficult issues as the two sides work their way through this minefield. We should remember that on patent enforcement, India has a very good track record. This is especially important when you compare the Indian track record to what's happening in China, I think, and it's important to take a relative perspective of what's going on. But nevertheless, it's important to note that there are also some legitimate concerns, and as Shaurya said a little while ago, both sides have their own national interests at heart, and I think we'll have to see which way this pans out. As far as Indian investments in India are concerned, I have no doubt, I think there's going to be a huge natural momentum built up by the fact that India is slated to be growing at a much higher clip than China, even in the next, I think I lost my...
We can hear you. Okay, so let's fix the connection with Mr. Bilimoria and come back to him, because I have a question on IP that I have with him. Seema, coming back to you. Again, a comment from the business side, but I'm not asking you to comment on the business bit. One of the things that Indian companies in the pharma space, for instance, are talking about is the fact that there's a huge difference between the patent laws in Europe and the United States. And the view from the Indian side, if I can bring it to the table, is that the US needs to align with European law, which is of a far higher standard. In all of this, and I once again ask you this, it seems that we are always on the back foot, even in areas and spheres where America needs to catch up with the rest of the world. They export great technology. They have Google. They've built up all the famous IT brands. We do the back office work for a lot. But, is it also time for America to concede that they are playing catch up in many, many other areas, including affordable healthcare, for instance?
Absolutely. They have a problem with their patent law. Even the Wall Street Journal, which is a friend of American business, right? They had an editorial a few years ago that patents are granted too easily in America. So
you can patent probably anything, really.
Especially the problem in the pharma industry is about evergreening. And the Indian patent law doesn't allow that. And I think...
And yet Americans come and say, oh God, you make the process so difficult for us, and you should be much more restrictive.
I think we are on the right side on this issue,
okay.
Absolutely. The Supreme Court judgment, which is 200 pages long, I recommend that everybody read that.
And on the American side too.
Absolutely, because it was against their company. The thing is that they shift molecules around.
So maybe Cyrus Mistry should have given a copy of that 200-page judgment that you very nicely brought out here to the table to the entire US business delegation. So
absolutely.
Good reading for the flight back home.
Basically what the Americans are demanding, our laws are TRIPS compliant, right?
Yeah.
The Americans are demanding of India a TRIPS plus situation.
Okay.
I don't think we should concede that. Oh. And on compulsory license, Americans have used compulsory licensing in an array of industry. like, you know, I did a very long piece on this.
Okay.
And American NGOs are telling the Indian government, please don't change your law.
Absolutely.
Because the medicines provided by Indian companies, they are helping millions of people in Africa.
I am in fact told, Seema Sirohi, that at some point when this affordable health care and the universalization of insurance in the manner in which President Obama tried to push it through, how he tried to fix the broken Medicare system, that this also came up in American media discourse quite a bit. But Percy Bilimoria, if I could come back to you, we seem to have gotten over the technical issues. Seema Sirohi here was talking about our Supreme Court's 200-page judgment in response to a question where I said that, you know, there are perhaps areas where the US needs to catch up with the rest of the world and not just go around telling every domain, sovereign domain, to change its own laws. She spoke about the fact that the US now seems to be suggesting TRIPS Plus, and that America itself as a system has used more compulsory licensing than perhaps any other domain. So on that very random kind of question, Percy, how would you come in on this issue with regard to the pressure that a whole lot of the Indian establishment constantly faces from the US about fixing this and that, although perhaps if the US were to concede the issue, they need to move ahead with the rest of the world?
Yes, I think, as I said earlier, there are merits to both sides of the argument. You should also factor in the fact that unlike in the US, there is no social security net here in India. So obviously, when you have judgments and the Indian government expressing their concerns on this. That is a very important factor because the availability of cheap and affordable medicine is of primary importance. And I have no doubt that our policies will continue to be governed by this one very dominant objective, as it should be. But at the same time, there are certain arguments that have been very well articulated by the US side, and I think there is bound to be some give and take on this in the near future. I think this is a very major milestone. If there can be some kind of an agreement on the patent issue, it will be a very major milestone because there is a large part of US industry that does look at this as some kind of a test case, and the other, of course, being the insurance sector. The insurance bill, that was in the changes in the insurance.
Seema Sirohi wanted to come in on that.
FDI policy.
Yeah, go ahead.
The US industry makes everything a test case. So, right now, pharma wants X, Y, and Z, and the laws of another country be damned. So, I mean, I don't think that that's a fair way to negotiate. They set a certain set of goals that unless you comply with this, you're no good. But I think that Indian laws are fair.
And implementation is flexible.
Implementation has been very quick lately on patent issues. Things have gone through the various stages of the process, judicial process, quite quickly. And many, many judgments have gone in their favor. They never remember that. The one or two issues they'll pick on and then they want the law changed. So India, I don't think, is going to give in on this evergreening concept. The American pharma industry changes a drug a little bit and then applies for a new patent. So that I don't think we are going to agree to.
Okay, we are not going to agree to evergreening. Percy, before I come back to you, let me draw in Shaurya Doval into this conversation, not from a legal or an analytical point of view, but purely from an investment expectation point of view. Once again, I pose this question to you, Shaurya Doval, because when I look at the at what was supposed to be on the agenda pending confirmations, of course. The first item, for instance, Shaurya, that was put up on the India-US business discussion was smart cities. The second item was sanction-related concerns. The third item was digital India. The fourth was trade and taxation issues, and I can keep going down that list. Is there a sense that you pick up from your interactions with the financial part of the world that there is an investment inflow that is likely, and visits like this and the next major policy event milestone of the budget 2015 that is coming up exactly in a month from now, that's going to really change the flavor of the day?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think this is a very, very important point that you picked up, because if India is to grow at the 8-9% growth rate that it is now targeting, and if we are to realize the kind of policies and the objectives that we've set out for ourselves, India is going to need significant amounts of investment across sectors, whether it's infrastructure, you mentioned smart cities. We're looking at about $1 trillion of spend on infrastructure. We talk about manufacturing with the Make in India campaign, and then we can go through a host of other issues where India will be needing or looking for investment. I don't know if you're aware, but America has a total FDI. So America exports about $360 billion of foreign direct investment annually. It is about 30% of the global FDI flows. If the American economy also starts to pick up, and even at these numbers, America has a compulsion, it has a requirement that it must find havens for its capital which yield consistent return and capital growth. There are not many markets in the world as you look today where American capital can be deployed. India is one such opportunity. So there will be a tremendous amount of push from the United States as well to try and find an investment destination for its capital, which is a very good situation to be in for India. What is important, as one of your panelists was earlier pointing out, was that this engagement will have to be at terms which will be mutually acceptable and not unilateral by any one nation state. We do not expect Americans to take everything that India is saying, but even India will not be able to accept the entire investment or the terms of the engagement based on what Americans would like to see in India happen. So there is a market, there is indeed a market for the American capital and for American technology and for American businesses. India is that unique bright spot today in the global economy. India also needs to bring many of its processes and its laws and its methodology of working at comparable standards to global levels. We all concede that, and I think that's a process that we are all working towards. And I think with this new government and with the Prime Minister's tremendous push, we've actually gone a long way from where we were about a year ago. And I think this will be an evolutionary process. But there is indeed a business compulsion today, both for United States and for India, for this greater economic engagement. So I think sessions like this and interactions like this, as I said earlier, between governments provide that cover fire for actually businesses to find that equilibrium where they can engage in. So I think by and large my assessment would be that this can only be very, very good news for the general tailwinds that we have in favor both in the US and India right now.